Hey everybody, make sure to check out part 1 of this 2-part discussion video where everybody talks about Season 6 cards. This is going to be a more general discussion. Also, make sure to check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/IACommand. Patreons are getting a special bonus for these videos since they are very long discussion videos. Patreons will have access to a downloadable MP3 with just the audio for these to make it easier for listening on your portable device, like if you want to listen to this while you're out on a walk or doing something other than being at your computer. That's a great way to do it. Just for Patreon supporters, thank you all for supporting the channel and enjoy. All right, I think we should probably start to wrap it up. I'm going to have to log off pretty soon, in about 15 minutes. So two things I want to cover real quick is faction balance. So this season we had an issue with I think Rebel and Empire got a couple more cards like figures than Scum did, and Trevi's pointed out in the Slack that actually Scum has a few less deployment cards than the other two factions do in IACP. Herbie, you've been beating this drum. I'm going to pass it off to you, but first I'm just going to say that the steering committee has acknowledged the discrepancy, and you'll probably see in future seasons a little bit more for Scum, just a little bit more than for the other factions, just to kind of get things balanced out and then moving forward. So, Herbie, curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, when he pointed that out, it was a feeling that I always had, but I never actually sat down and started counting the actual cards, right? But I think he pointed out that Scum was down like 7 or 8 cards, and just from the noticing from the kind of just over the past couple seasons, just this most recent one, it just seems like there was more attention being given to the troopers and to the rebels and the Imperials. And this season we ended up getting 3. So I think, as you said, the steering committee has acknowledged that, you've recognized it. As long as I think moving forward there is some sort of a rebalancing effort where maybe the next season or after that there's going to be a few more Scum coming out and not as many as the others, to kind of put those numbers back on track. As far as the overall balance between the factions, I still do feel that I don't know how it's going to happen. Maybe Mando's gonna tilt things now in the tournament. I don't know. The next couple tournaments, if the overall power of Scum is going to be able to kind of get back on par with the others. But yeah, I've felt over the past couple seasons that I think there was a lot of just lingering effects of the days where Hunter was dominant, and it just seemed like people were more interested in making sure other factions and other archetypes were given more attention, and rightfully so. But I think it kind of got to the point where it's gotten out of whack. Now it just seems like too much attention was given to that, and as a result, you're down 7 or 8 cards in the Scum faction now. So.
Yep. Joey, non-Scum player, Scum hater. Are Scum whiners, or is it real? Is the Scum oppression real?
The Scum oppression is extremely real. And the more we can fight against it, the more stable our meta will be. But all jokes aside, I do think that there's a nice balance between all the factions now. The reason I probably particularly hate Scum is that it feels to me that they do the type of strategy that I hate the most, which is sit in the corner, power up, and then kill your opponent in one fell swoop, which I'm not a huge fan of.
Yeah. I agree, but I think it's not at all about the damage. I personally would say it's all in the traits. Like I said, if you count up the amount of 6, 7, and 8 point figures in Scum, it's like there's like 15 of them. If you count up the amount of 6, 7, and 8 point hunters, there's like close to 10. There's like 9 or 10. It's crazy because that's pretty much all they have is hunter, damage, and it gets really repetitive. And I think that is part of what Mando revealed It's just that having sub-traits and having other options, even though he was a hunter, because he had the guardian and vehicle sub-traits, and you could pair him up with other characters for reasons other than just, oh, well, I like them because I like that kind of hunter. That is a level of list building that causes not being able to pair people up for that kind of a synergy is, I think, in my opinion, part of why I avoided Scum for a while. I think a big thing it would be if they were to be able to take back the droids, take back the smugglers, take back creature is supposed to be kind of their trait, but with the Rancor being so bad, the Bantha not being in meta, they've kind of lost out on a lot of that too. Wampa helped fix it, but there's, Wampa Lothcat spam can only get you so far. I think they just need more more prevalent traits than just Hunter, and more sub traits than just Guardian.
Yeah, I think you're pointing something out that it's a good point there. I think Mando kind of shows the possibilities of what hunters can be. It's not just somebody, as Joey says, that just sits in the back, powers up, and waits for the big kill. But you can actually use them in so many other different types of ways, and I think that's where the potential for the Scum can go. I think there's more than enough characters already in the meta that are just sit back and wait. Like with what's the droid that came out, the HK droid, right? I think there's more than their fair share of those types of figures, but I think that there's so much more potential in other types of figures that are more mid-range, maybe even up close type of figures that haven't yet been explored, I think.
Those figures definitely exist. Think about it, they're just they just need the upgrades. There are HK assassin droids other than 47.
Yeah, but those are horrible. Yeah, those HKs.
Yeah, they suck.
Yeah.
There's the Rancor and the Bantha and Nexu. There are characters other than hunters that could, with the characters that are already really good, like IG-11, like HK-47. They're just not good. And I do also want to comment on Vinto. I've been beating that drum for a while, that there isn't a single 5-point character that you can use in Scum right now.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I really think Vinto needs a buff.
Yep, that all makes sense. Scum's tricky because whenever we try to design interesting things in Scum, their scummy things are sometimes not fun to play against, and so people complain that it's not fun to play against. It's not fun that all my figures are bleeding and taking strain for bleeding, HK-47, and that they're dealing so much damage to me when I choose not to take bleed. We got a lot of complaints on HK-47, and so he ended up being kind of a vanilla to not offend anybody. Is my take on how things went, but Matt, huh? You agree with that?
I just said I'll agree with that because I look at him and it's like, oh, there's not really anything neat about him.
Yeah.
Look,
so
he does what Dengar does, and Bosk does, and regular Mando does, and there's one more. Well, and now Migs does, and you see the dilemma.
Yeah, he seems to be a character that people are only going to want to use if they're going to try to build a strain list, because beyond that, he doesn't seem to be the type of figure that you're going to go to. I mean, I'd rather use Migs than him, even though Migs is not even a hunter. But, at least he can gain access to tools, which is, a card that you're going to be using in that with the hunters anyway. So,
yeah, HK-47 does still get play. As a droid mostly. But he's still good, and he has fans, so I'm not going to throw shade at HK-47. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, Scum. And it's all. I also wanted to say it's tricky to design. 6-point to 7-point figures are probably the easiest to design, and then we just kind of throw figures into that cost range when we know they're just going to be not a queen piece, not a support piece. We try to save those 3, 4, 5-point slots, and then the 10 and up slots for figures that are we really need to serve a purpose. There's something that we need done for this for this faction, okay, let's dip into these lower and higher point figure costs, because if you do too many 4-point, 5-point figures that are just kind of random shooters, you end up with this problem, which is what we saw in the CMIC custom skirmish mod before IACP, which was, a lot of what he did was just recost everything down. And then you just end up with these beef efficiency lists where you just jam as many 5 and 6 point beefers into your list as you can, and you just win out with more health, more attacks, etc. So we like to keep things in the 7 range for like randos. It just keeps the activation count stable, and it keeps the like efficiency type of lists, like sort of thing, stable. And then, Afra was very specific. She actually was going to be 6 points when I first submitted her, and then we were like, oh, we need another like 4-point figure in Scum. We need a support figure that's affordable and is not going to take up an attacker list. Let's make her 4 points, and we toned down some of her abilities. Same thing with Bib. He was made 3 points because he's supposed to fill in for the Rebel Care Package, so he needs to be comparably priced. And then I'll also say, like, Queen pieces are really hard to get right. They're really hard to balance, which you guys have seen with Mando. That happened with Boba. It took 2 seasons to get Boba, like, quote, right, finger quotes, right. Some people think he's still not good enough. Some people think he's too good. Like, we get equal comments especially from people looking at IACP for the first time. They're like, Boba's insane. He doesn't die, and he like does all this stuff, and he deals all this damage to all my figures, and he moves 6. This guy's crazy. You guys are nuts. So, yeah, queen pieces are really hard. So we try not to do like a ton of them, but we're slowly like looking at that point cost of 4 to 5 and 6. And we're like, okay, let's do this one. We'll do 1 this season. We'll see how it does. Slowly release those. So anyway, that was a long way to say that.
I'm not trying to pick on HK47 or on 6 to 7 point figures in general. Just, options are good. Just that you want more than a 7-point hunter. Like, having lots of 7-point hunters is fine, just as long as there's more than 7-point hunters that you can play, right? That was my only point, really.
Yep. Matt, do you have any thoughts on Scum?
I think just one point to check in that, Scum does well in most timed games. We've got a lot of opportunity to pick up points sort of outside of the traditional methods of attracting points. So, I think, acknowledge the point in general that, that the Scum faction is missing a few cards, but would sort of overlay the comment that in a 75-minute tournament, you can probably design quite a compelling deck, especially with some of the more recent cards to extract a points victory over your opponent.
Yeah, that is a unique issue with the playtesting league, is that most games are untimed or have random time limits set by the players in each match. So that's something interesting to think about, for sure. All right, I want to move into the last topic here, so I can get out and take care of my kid. So the last topic I want to talk about is complexity in IACP. So this is a issue that is getting a lot of discussion within the steering committee. I think recently Jake just put out a post to the Discord and the Slack asking if our cards are too complex or if there's too much complexity in IACP. It's something we got feedback on in season 5 with Dr. Afra's original wording being confusing, Mara Jade's wording being confusing to people, and then with season 6 we got some comments from people about the keywords being not new player friendly, where you don't know what abilities do now. It doesn't spell it out on the card, even though it saves a lot of space. And then finally, board complexity going up with stuff like protective fire in the original Mando, being very complex once you start combining it with things like Onar's extra protection, Greedo's dying, parting shot, another Greedo attacking Onar and Mando, and what happens when all these figures are attacking each other, and who the hell knows what's going on. So I want to hear what you guys think about complexity in IACP. Is it getting too complex? Is the complexity a good thing? What do you guys think? Let's Matt, why don't you start us off, because I think you had some experience with this, right, with Mando?
I would. I guess the starting point is that Imperial Assault is not a simple game, and it's a steep learning curve, and there's a lot of things that sort of happen and timing instances, the way in which matters are resolved and wording on cards, and that's not a feature of IACP. That's the game itself. It's very complex. Constantly sort of asking questions, and I think really grateful to the community that we can write a question and somebody tends to always be online to be able to respond. I don't feel personally that IACP's introducing any additional complexity. The complexity exists in the sort of a construction of the game itself, and I'm a big fan of the extra optionality that you introduce. A card like Afra kind of changes the dynamic and allows you to think about playing the game differently. I think that's fantastic. Khotan and her ability to dish out a random token, just changes up the way that you can move play. If the meta's changing and certain characters are sort of no longer powerful, a card like Khotan or Afra or somebody can change that meta or introduce a new option. I think I'm really grateful for what the steering committee's doing and their the new cards that they're introducing. I think what you might be referring to or seeing is probably the rate of introduction. Was sort of I think it's about 2 seasons a year or a bit approaching that, and maybe that's where there's some sort of complexity or challenge. It's a lot to continue to familiarise yourself with when the new cards are coming out at the rate. So maybe that's creating some of the what you're observing, TV Boy.
Yeah, and that's something we're also discussing internally, and I think we might see a bit of a change with that as well, with just how many cards we're pumping out compared to the size of the player base and the ability of the meta to adapt to them, to all those cards coming out. Joey, you're an old school player. What do you think about complexity in the IACP compared to what it used to be with FFG cards?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like since I'm an old hat at this and I basically can just follow the seasons as they come, nothing seems too complex to me. But on another note is that I kind of think that if you can't fit the text of certain keywords into the main card, then maybe that unit has too much stuff going for it. So not necessarily complexity, but just overloading of certain units with too many abilities, if that makes sense.
And I will say that we use the Kensei card suite editor that like automatically formats the text for you. And my personal rule is if you can't fit the text onto a regular FFG card without it shrinking the text, then it's too wordy, like Boba Fett.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
Stay by that rule of thumb too.
I think keywords are okay. Like I think we did a good job with which ones, or the steering committee that was active during season 6 production did a good job picking which ones should go into the textless area of the card versus which ones should stay.
I completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's just as you've mentioned, it's not exactly new player friendly for old hat players or people who've been playing for a couple of seasons. It makes perfect sense, and the keywords that were chosen were a good choice.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if we decide to move more of those keywords, because that I think it definitely like exponentially increases the accessibility issue the more keywords you move up out of the text box.
Go
ahead, Destructor.
Player here. Yeah, The complexity, I don't think, is at all the issue. Obviously, we did not make Greedo. Greedo was here for quite a while before we ever got here. And have you ever seen what happens when a Greedo shoots another Greedo? I did this for the first time the other day, and I also had focus and command cards that both of us wanted to play, and my gosh is that annoying. Trying to go through, because my Greedo shot his Greedo, so his Greedo got to shoot my Greedo, but then my Greedo got to shoot his Greedo, so then I shot him, then he shot me, then I shot him, then he killed me, so then I got to shoot somebody else. You had to do command card playing for all of those attacks. It's just so complicated. So I don't think complexity is it, but since I can still remember, I mean, it was less than a year ago that I was first looking at the changes, and honestly, it was just the amount of changes, the amount of new cards and the amount of changes that at first I was hesitant to adopt IACP at all, just because it seemed like there was just a lot of abilities per card, yeah, but also so many characters, really, so many changes. I do think pumping things out a little more slowly would help with that.
Herbie, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm also. I agree as well. The for me, I don't think I think complexity in regards to triggers, right? I think those things they're fun to a certain degree, and I think a lot of it has to do with circumstances, and familiarity, right? Like I think the more familiar you are with it, the more easy it's going to be to remember the certain triggers that happen on certain things. Like I'm sure I've gotten to the point, I feel like there's at least almost every single game I'm probably going to forget at least something, right? There's always going to be something that I'm going to forget that I probably could have done. In terms of like specific things like what he was saying of like Greedo against a Greedo, we had the same experience with like Mando Onar and Mando Onar against each other, and it was this labyrinth of return fire and extra protection, and it was insane. But yeah, I don't think that's a bad thing. I honestly don't think that's something. Actually, I think it adds to a certain element of it that you're strategizing how it's all going to play. Yeah, it was great. But I do agree with you. I do agree with you though that the amount of cards that are coming out can be a bit overwhelming, and I think that's what kind of lends itself to maybe some of the frustration of I think the complexity lends itself more to that, of just adjusting to all these different things and then trying to figure out how those cards can then be played with old cards, and then you get a certain season, and then by the time you get used to that, then all of a sudden there's more cards that are being dropped for the next season. So I definitely think that it could maybe be simplified with maybe rather than the amount of cards we had coming out, maybe each faction having 2 or 3 max coming out, and I think that might help out. Obviously, that would impact how long the seasons would be, because you're probably not going to need as long of a season to play test when you're having fewer cards that you're dealing with. I don't know how that would all be figured out, but that's probably the biggest concern I would have in terms of complexity, because I don't think the issues of the card designs, I don't think that's really anything that's, I think certain characters, certain figures are easier to learn than others, and that's just certain characters. When you start off, they're a lot easier to use than the ones that you're going to use when you've been playing for a while and you figured out what type of style you like. So in regards to complexity, I think the biggest issue would just be just the overall amount of stuff that's coming out.
So let me ask this then.
I think the best.
Let me ask this.
Sorry, go ahead.
Is there room for more complexity on individual cards than the most complex things we've done? Thinking about like Afra, Clan of Two being pretty complex. Like, I think those are at the upper ends of the complexity scale as far as the cards we've put out. Could we go higher? Is there because we can make like really modular stuff that's like you've got a lot of moving parts, but probably would have a lot of words. Like, is there room for more complexity than the most complex, or are we kind of at a sweet spot and maybe try to keep it from getting higher than it already is?
I think Kyle's one guy that's been kind of asking for a lot of interactive triggers, and of traits. I'm afraid to say more, because I don't know what you guys have actually been conjuring up back there in the lab. I think maybe just throwing one out and seeing how that plays itself out would be a good test to it. But I don't think the Clan of Two and the Afras is that complex, to be honest. I don't think it's something that's beyond just giving a few extra seconds of really trying to figure out what the hell you're reading, and then figure out how that's actually going to interact with so many other things.
What do you think, Matt? Oh yeah, go ahead, Destructor.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Matt. I do like where we're at now. I do like the idea of throwing out one more complex one. Just gonna throw out that you would probably have to have a plan B, right? So if that doesn't stick and it doesn't work, that you're gonna have so complex, then okay, how are we gonna make that way more simple, change them up going forward? But I think the biggest ways is I struggled, a year ago when I was getting into it as a new player, because I can still remember it like it was yesterday, is to use recosting as much as humanly possible, because recosting is so simple. And then also to very clearly make the distinction between what is a recost, what is a balancing change, and what is like a brand new card, right? Because when I was getting into it, I felt the need almost to only use some of the IACP changes, because there were some cards that I was like, well, I feel like this is a small change but not a big change, so I'm just going to recost it instead. Stuff like that to very clearly indicate which cards are which, so if somebody wants to go into it slowly, maybe they only use the recosting changes because those are very easy to keep track of, then move forward from there, maybe even just not use any of the new cards until they've gotten acclimated with the old ones.
Okay.
I think you're in a sweet spot right now. No, personally, there's enough that you've got cards that can kind of do different things and can be used in different applications. But to add too much more, you're always going to be coming across a card that you haven't seen before. You can't remember how it plays out, and bring it up, and it just opens up Pandora's box in terms of what you could do with it, or if you're playing against it. So I wouldn't be a big fan of seeing more complex cards than what you're producing at the moment.
What do you think, Joey?
I don't think anything's necessarily too complex. But I don't have the biggest imagination, so I really don't know where you can go complexity-wise from where we currently are. It'd be interesting to see what you're able to cook up, and if it's too complex, I think the playtesters will let you know. So I think you can stretch for those types of things and see how things work out in terms of player opinion.
Okay, well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Unless anybody had anything really pressing they needed to get off their chest.
Yeah, the only other thing I would say is just I think there's also, you guys, in recognition of what you guys are dealing with, is that you also need to keep the people excited about what you're putting out there. I think if you pull back too much, that might, I guess in just the amount of cards that you guys are sending out too. If it's too few cards, that might affect the overall excitement that people have to play it. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Could I take this
I was just
moment
making a
just
joke. Viv and Mando are the best.
Could I take
Go
this
ahead.
moment just to express my gratitude for what the IACP steering committee's doing? You guys are all doing this as volunteers, and putting in a lot of time and effort to to continue to keep a game alive. And I'm really grateful, and I think the entire community is really grateful. And what you guys are doing is fantastic. So I just want to
Here. I concur.
Amen to that, man. That is, yes. Just thank you so much. I've even heard in some of the FFG interviews when they talk about how dedicated the IA fan base is and how much we work to keep the game alive. I'm like, yes, that's me, and I'm so thankful that I can count myself lucky enough to be a part of this.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for saying that, and I know all the steering committee members are probably listening to this too. So I'll say it's easy when the community is as good as this one is. I think if we had a community that was, toxic or not as grateful or accommodating as you guys are, especially when we make mistakes or we make cards that are, you know, in hindsight, obviously have problems that, you know, maybe we could have seen ahead of time. You guys are very gracious, and the community is very good about giving feedback without, you know, harsh words or whatever, and it helps our egos.
Yeah, you guys are definitely doing a lot of a really good job over the past few years. So just keep it up.
All
They're
right.
doing
Man,
okay,
it
I
is
guess,
so
but they
amazing.
still can't get Mando's dice pool right.
Okay,
Blue,
Joey,
red, green.
I've remembered this time. It's in my photo editor. I'm gonna swap those dice this time when I put the the probation stamp on him.
Isn't there another character that has it out of order as well?
It's
Probably.
Triss, but that's because
Yeah.
I put it to the fact that she has style tokens in campaign, and so it's her style. So I can appreciate
It's the
that.
haircut. Yeah.
I will double check the dice order on all of the
That's
cards.
true. Who pays attention to trust?
And maybe I'll switch one that was already correct and see if Joey notices.
Oh, I will.
Oh, this is gonna be a game now. This is gonna be some
Good
horrible game. We're just gonna start switching up dice pools of different characters to see who notices.
Nobody cares except Joey.
It's true. It's true.
All right, guys. Thanks for coming on to talk. So, thank you to Joey, to Destructor, to Herbie, and to Matt for coming on to talk. I really love doing these like once per season kind of community check-ins with some representatives from the community. It's great to get people's perspectives on things outside of the steering committee. So, guys, thanks for coming on, and thanks for this really long chat. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for organizing this.
Yeah.
All right, take care.
Cheers, TV boy. Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you.